On a frozen mountain road in Colorado, a police investigator's SUV spun out of control after a hail of gunfire sent him crashing through the guardrail. His vehicle flipped, metal twisted, fuel leaking onto the snow. High above, the criminals who ambushed him watched the wreck burn and whispered the same cold sentence. "He won't survive that. Let the fire finish him." But what they didn't know was that inside the crumpled SUV, the officer was still breathing, barely. And beside him, his injured German shepherd refused to abandon him, pawing the broken window, howling into the storm with the last strength in his body. A howl meant for no human ear. Yet somehow, a Navy SEAL on leave heard it. That single cry would turn a quiet night into a battle for justice, expose a hidden criminal network, and reveal a miracle no one saw coming. Before we begin, tell me where you're watching from. Drop your country or city in the comments. And if you believe that God still protects those who can't protect themselves, hit like, share this story, and subscribe for more tales of loyalty, courage, and miracles in the darkest nights. Winter had a way of swallowing sound in the mountains of Colorado. Snow didn't just fall in Silver Creek, it wrapped the world in a white hush, as if God himself had pressed a finger to his lips and whispered, "Listen, this is where everything changes." On Highway 17, the world was little more than 2 lanes of black cutting through endless white. Headlights carved narrow tunnels through the storm. Beyond that, nothing existed. Ethan Hayes kept his hands locked at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel, knuckles pale against the leather. 34, with a tired, boyish face and eyes that had seen far too many internal affairs reports stained with quiet corruption, he drove an aging black SUV that rattled every time the wind hit just right. In the back, buckled into a reinforced crate, a German shepherd pressed his nose against the bars. Rex, 6 years old, sable coat, dark saddle, eyes that didn't miss much and forgave even less. "Almost there, buddy," Ethan muttered, more to calm himself than the dog. "Just a few more miles. We get this drive done, we change everything." The heater wheezed, wipers squeaked. A thumb-sized USB drive, no thicker than a nickel, rested in a stitched pocket sewn inside the inner collar of Rex's tactical harness. No one would think to look there, no one except the man who had ordered Ethan dead. The road curved along a ridge, where the guardrail disappeared into nothingness. Wind shook the SUV sideways. Ethan leaned forward, eyes narrowed, heart beating like a drum in an empty church. That's when he saw them. Headlights in the rearview mirror. Too close, too steady, not drifting in the storm like every other sane driver. A second set appeared to the left, like a predator joining the hunt. Ethan's pulse quickened. No, not here, not now. The SUV to his left pulled even, its windows blacked out. The one behind closed the gap until its grille filled Ethan's mirror. For a heartbeat, all 3 vehicles drifted side by side in a slow, terrible ballet above a drop of 100 feet. Then came the flash, muzzle flicker, the windshield spiderwebbed, bullets tore through glass and steel. "Rex down!" Ethan shouted, jerking the wheel. The world lost traction. Tires skidded on ice. The SUV fishtailed toward the guardrail and through it. For a brief, weightless moment, Ethan saw nothing but snow and sky swapping places. The steering wheel kicked. Metal screamed. Airbags exploded. His body snapped forward, then back, pain flaring through his ribs like broken glass. Then everything went dark. The SUV tumbled down the embankment, finally coming to rest on its side in a bowl of white. Steam hissed from the hood. One headlight flickered and died, leaving only the storm's gray breath. Inside, Ethan hung half-twisted in his seatbelt, blood trickling from his forehead, breath shallow, consciousness slipping like water through open fingers. Rex lay pinned against the crate door, shoulder bleeding, chest rising and panting bursts. Pain lanced through his leg when he tried to move, but something deeper than instinct told him to stay awake. Stay, guard, protect. He dragged himself forward, claws scraping plastic, and pressed his head against Ethan's arm. A low whine escaped his throat, barely louder than the wind. Above, on the road, the 2 trucks idled for a moment. Through the whiteout, a silhouette stepped to the broken guardrail, broad-shouldered, long winter coat, breath puffing in calm clouds. Mason Cole, lieutenant, decorated officer. Public hero of the Silver Creek Canine Bureau, Private Monster. He stared down at the dark smear where Ethan's SUV had vanished into the trees. The storm clawed at his face, but his eyes remained cold. "No one survives that in this weather," he said. One of his men hesitated. "You want to go down and check, sir?" Cole didn't even look at him. "No. The snow will bury what's left by morning. Let the mountain do the paperwork." He turned away. Up on the ridge, engines growled and tires rolled on. Down below, in the broken shell of a car, a man and his dog fought for one more breath in a world that had already written them off. Rex lifted his head once more and howled, weak, wavering. But it went out into the storm like a prayer from the bottom of a well. Someone heard it. Harper Quinn didn't like winter, but the mountains didn't ask for her opinion. Her little cabin sat tucked between lines of pines like a secret someone had hidden and forgotten. A thin wisp of smoke curled up from the chimney, torn apart by the wind before it could decide on a shape. Inside, the world was all wood and warmth. A fire snapped in the stone hearth. A kettle hummed on an old iron stove. On the floor, a German shepherd lay with her paws stretched out toward the heat. Shadow. 3 years old, female, black and tan, with eyes that looked like they'd learned to read souls. Once, she'd run point on missions overseas with the Navy SEAL team, finding bombs, tracking threats, standing where humans feared to stand. Now she fetched sticks and slept by the fire. Harper dropped heavily into the worn armchair near the flames, a thick knit sweater hiding the angry scar that traced along her left shoulder and down her back. 32 and already retired before her time. Honorably discharged, they called it. Tactful exile was closer to the truth. She rolled her aching shoulder and shut her eyes, listening to the storm trying to scratch its way through the walls. Silence had a different sound out here. Less like peace, more like a test. Shadow's head snapped up, ears forward, body stiff. Harper's eyes opened instantly. Old instincts didn't die, they just slept lightly. "What is it, girl?" she asked. Shadow didn't answer, of course. She was already moving, trotting to the door, nose lifting into the narrow draft that seeped through the frame. A low growl rumbled in her chest. Then, so soft, Harper almost missed it. A sound slipped through the storm. A distant, broken howl. Not a wild wolf, not a coyote. A dog calling from somewhere between this world and the next. Harper's heart gave a small, traitorous kick. Her body was still in Colorado, but some part of her was back in a desert halfway across the world, hearing the echo of K9s calling out when things went wrong. She stood in one smooth motion. "All right," she sighed, reaching for her jacket. "We're going." Within minutes, she had her boots laced tight, a medkit slung over one shoulder, a flashlight clipped to her vest, and a thermal blanket rolled under her arm. Shadow was already at the door, tail low, focused. Harper stepped into the night. The storm slapped her in the face. Snow stung her cheeks. The world narrowed to the beam of her flashlight and the darker shapes of trees beyond. "Find," Harper whispered. Shadow didn't need more. She lowered her nose, caught the fading scent of engine oil, burned rubber, blood, and fear, then bounded forward, leaving neat paw prints in the virgin snow. They followed a narrow access trail that cut from Harper's cabin to the main road. The wind howled. The trees moaned. Somewhere, an owl reconsidered its life choices. After what felt like hours but was only minutes, they reached the highway. The road was almost empty, a thin line under the roiling sky. Headlights passed occasionally. Distant streaks of light from people who didn't know a story was unfolding just out of sight. Shadow turned left without hesitation. Harper followed, boots crunching, eyes scanning the edge of the road. Then she saw it. Fresh skid marks etched into the snow, a shattered section of guardrail, and a black smear down the white slope where something big had left the world of asphalt behind. "Damn," she breathed. Harper moved to the edge and shone her light down. The beam caught the twisted metal of an SUV lodged against a stand of saplings halfway down the embankment. Steam bled from the hood. One wheel still spun lazily. Shadow barked sharply. The answer came up from below, a weak whine, then silence. "There you are," Harper murmured. "Hold on." She clipped a rope to the guardrail and wrapped the other end around her waist, checked the knot the way her SEAL instructor had taught her years ago, then began to descend. The slope was slick. Snow crumbled under her boots, exposing black rock and frozen earth. Twice, she slid, catching herself with a gloved hand. Shadow picked her way down beside her with the sure-footedness of someone born for rough ground. They reached the SUV. The windshield was shattered, half filled with snow. The front end was crushed. Inside, a man hung from his seatbelt, head tilted at an unnatural angle, blood matted in dark hair. His chest rose in tiny, stubborn movements. Harper's training snapped into place. "Shadow, watch," she ordered. The dog took position, ears pricked, watching the darkness beyond like it might decide to move. Harper smashed the remaining glass with her elbow, then reached in and checked for a pulse at the man's neck. Weak, but there. "Hey, hang in there," she muttered. "You don't get to quit on this road, not tonight." From the back of the SUV came a low growl. Harper pivoted, hand already reaching toward the knife at her belt. Two golden brown eyes glowed in the gloom behind the front seats. A German shepherd lay wedged against the crate door, leg twisted, fur darkened by blood at the shoulder. But despite the pain, his gaze was steady, teeth bared not in wild fear, but in warning. "Touch him wrong, and I won't care how much it hurts. I'll go through you." Harper softened her stance, dropping her hand away from the knife. "Easy, big guy," she said quietly. "I've got one of you at home. I'm not the enemy." She raised her hand slowly, palm out. The dog sniffed the air, nose flaring. He caught the scent of shadow, of antiseptic, of steel and leather, and something else. Memory. The smell of soldiers and long nights and quiet courage. The growl faded to a heavy pant. "That's better," Harper murmured. "We're taking him out of here. You coming?" The dog stared at her for a long heartbeat. Then, with a shuddering effort, he dragged himself forward toward his unconscious handler and rested his head against the man's chest. Together, or not at all. Harper nodded once. She understood that language. "Shadow," she called softly. "Cover me." The night tightened around them, the storm pressing in, but there in that bowl of snow, a decision had been made. A man who knew too much, a dog guarding more than a life, and a woman who'd sworn she was done with other people's wars, now tied together by a single, desperate howl in the dark. Harper worked fast. She cut the seatbelt, bracing Ethan's weight carefully as she eased him out of the half-collapsed car. Pain flared awake in his broken ribs, but he stayed unconscious, his body too battered to argue. Shadow circled the wreck, tail stiff, scanning the tree line for any shape that didn't belong. Rex watched with tired, guarded eyes, his breathing shallow, but his gaze never strayed from Ethan's face. "All right, soldier," Harper muttered to the dog as she shifted Ethan onto the sling she'd brought. "Help me get him home, and then you and I are going to have a little chat." The climb back up to the guardrail was brutal. Snow slid under her boots. Ethan's body hung heavy. The sling dug into her shoulder, reawakening the old injury. Twice, she had to stop, teeth clenched, vision pulsing at the edges, but each time she felt Shadow nudge her knee, heard Rex's faint huff, and forced herself to keep moving. By the time she dragged Ethan over the guardrail and onto the shoulder of the road, her lungs burned and her muscles shook. A passing car slowed, then sped up again when it saw there were already people there. No one wanted to get involved in mountain business at night. Harper didn't blame them. "Let's go," she told Shadow, more breath than voice. The hike back to the cabin felt longer than it was. Snowflakes clung to Ethan's lashes. Rex limped beside the sling, refusing to fall back, every step a vow he would not leave his human behind. By the time Harper shouldered open her cabin door, the fire had dwindled to a low red glow. She kicked it back to life with practiced motions, heat slowly pushing the cold back toward the door. She laid Ethan on the rug near the hearth, head supported by a folded blanket. Rex sank down beside him with a grunt, finally allowing his injured leg to rest. Harper worked by firelight. Old instincts guided her hands, checking pupils, feeling for broken ribs, cleaning wounds. She stitched the worst cuts, splinted what she could. Every now and then, Ethan flinched and muttered something disjointed, fragments of thought rising from the fog. "Rex, don't call her." Harper's gaze flicked to the dog. Rex's harness was scuffed and muddy, but one section at the neck showed signs of newer stitching, threads slightly darker than the rest, seamed thicker. "Interesting," she murmured. She didn't cut it open, not yet. That was a conversation to be had when the man breathing on her floor could answer a question without passing out. Hours slid by. Outside, the storm calmed from a roar to a whisper. Inside, crackling firelight painted the cabin in gold and shadow. At some point near dawn, Ethan groaned and blinked his eyes open. The first thing he saw was a wooden ceiling crossed with dark beams. The second was the flicker of orange light. The third was Rex's face hovering over him, eyes wide, ears forward. "Hey boy," Ethan rasped. We made it." Rex's tail thumped once against the floor, slow and careful. Then a new voice spoke. "You made it because your dog howls louder than most people pray." Ethan turned his head. Pain stabbed through his skull. He squinted through the haze and saw a woman kneeling beside him, dark hair pulled back, face lined with fatigue and something older, like a soldier who'd been asked for just one miracle too many and still kept showing up. "I'm Harper," she said. "You crashed. I dragged you out of the snow. You're in my cabin. Don't try to sit up unless you really enjoy passing out dramatically." He tried anyway. The room tilted, white noise roared in his ears. Then a firm hand pressed against his shoulder, pinning him back gently but decisively. "There it is," Harper sighed, the male urge to stand up in the middle of internal bleeding. "Who are you?" Ethan croaked. "Former Navy SEAL," she said, "currently on involuntary vacation. You'll live. It's not going to be fun, but you'll live." He swallowed, throat raw. "Rex?" Harper glanced at the dog, who now had his chin resting on Ethan's chest. "He's fine. Hurt, but stubborn. Like you. I bandaged his leg. Your other guardian angel over there didn't approve at first." She nodded toward Shadow, who lay near the hearth, watching the newcomer with a thoughtful, measuring gaze. "And that's—" "Shadow," Harper said. "She and I did a lot of stupid things in a lot of dusty countries. Now we do stupid things in the snow instead." Ethan let his head sink back into the blanket. For a moment, he just listened to the fire, to the soft click of dog nails on wood, to his own heartbeat slowly settling into something that didn't sound like a stampede. Then the memory slammed back in. The trucks, the gunfire, the guardrail giving way. His eyes sharpened. "I have to go," he said, trying to push himself up again. "I have to get to Denver. There's evidence. I have to—" Harper didn't let him move an inch. "You're not going anywhere," she said. "Not tonight. Maybe not tomorrow. You've got cracked ribs, a concussion, and half your blood is probably still somewhere on Highway 17. Talk first. Panic later." He stared at her, chest heaving. Then, reluctantly, he let go of the rope he was trying to climb in his mind and lay back. "Mason Cole," he whispered. "He did this." Harper's brows knit slightly. "Name sounds familiar." "Lieutenant, head of the Silver Creek K-9 Bureau, media darling, parade hero." Ethan's lip curled. "And the brains behind a nice little side business, using K-9's transport routes to move guns and money through the state. Nobody checks the crates. Nobody questions late-night transfers." Harper didn't look surprised. She'd met men like that in uniform before, decorated and rotten from the inside out. "You have proof?" she asked. Ethan closed his eyes for a second, then forced them open. "In Rex's collar," he said. "Micro USB, bank transfers, schedules, photos, enough to bury him, if we live long enough to hand it over." Harper glanced at the thick seam at the back of Rex's harness again. This time, she didn't just see clever sewing. She saw motive, target, reason. "So," she said slowly, "you're telling me that mangy scrap of nylon around your dog's neck is the most dangerous piece of clothing in Colorado right now?" Ethan managed a faint smile. "Something like that." Harper sat back on her heels, exhaling slowly. She had planned to spend this winter talking to no one but her dog and the occasional hardware store clerk. Heal, sleep, try not to remember the desert, try not to remember the last mission. Instead, the mountain had dropped a bleeding cop and a walking hard drive into her living room. Shadow shifted closer, resting her chin on Harper's knee, as if asking a silent question. "So, what now, boss?" Harper scratched between her ears. "What now?" she said quietly, more to herself than anyone, "is that a very bad man is going to realize his problem didn't die on that road, and he's going to come looking." Ethan swallowed. "You don't have to be involved. I'm already in this. You're not." Harper's eyes hardened. Too late, she said. You screamed into my valley. Your dog answered mine. That makes it my storm now. She stood and walked to the window. The wind had eased, but the snow still fell in slow, dreamlike flakes, burying the tracks they'd left behind. Rest, she said. When he comes, and he will, we'll need you a little less broken than you are right now. Behind her, Ethan closed his eyes. Rex pressed closer, and Shadow watched the door. Somewhere out there, Mason Cole was waking up to a nagging thought. The mountain doesn't always eat what you throw off the road. Sometimes it spits it back out, with teeth. Morning in the mountains came late and gray. Harper stood at the sink, watching pale light bleed slowly into the tree line. Steam rose from her mug. Outside, the world looked peaceful, almost innocent. She knew better. Behind her, Ethan sat propped against the wall, a blanket over his legs, Rex curled at his side. Shadow lay close, eyes moving from window to door to Ethan and back again, keeping her own kind of watch. Harper set the mug down in front of Ethan. Drink, she said. You'll hate the taste, but love the results. He took a sip, winced. You were a SEAL and a medic? Something like that, she said. Enough to keep people alive long enough to regret their life choices. He studied her for a moment. Why are you here, in this cabin, alone? Harper shrugged one shoulder. Some ghosts like quiet. Some wounds do, too. He opened his mouth to ask more, but Shadow lifted her head abruptly. Rex's ears snapped upright. A second later, Harper heard it too. Engines. Not one, not two, several, low and steady, moving in formation. Snowmobiles, maybe a truck, trying to pretend it didn't exist, making their way along the access paths that most tourists never found. Harper's body shifted without conscious thought. The mug was forgotten. Her spine straightened. The tiredness vanished, replaced by the clean, cold focus of a soldier who'd spent years walking toward gunfire instead of away from it. They found you fast, she said. Ethan's face went pale. Cole. Or his friends, Harper said. Doesn't really matter. Enemy by any other name still bleeds the same, say. She crossed to the small wooden desk in the corner and opened a drawer. Inside lay a handgun, a folded radio, and something that looked suspiciously like a military-grade GPS beacon. Thought you were retired, Ethan said. Harper smirked. Retired doesn't mean stupid. She clicked the beacon on. Signal boost to the only people who still pick up when I call, she said. Fed marshals, state guys who owe me a favor. They're far, and the weather's ugly, so they won't drop in immediately. But it's a start. She tossed a smaller device to Ethan. He caught it clumsily. If things go sideways, Harper said, hold this button for 5 seconds. It'll broadcast our coordinates on an emergency channel, last-ditch lifeline. And you? He asked. She slid a magazine into the handgun, checked the chamber, and holstered it at the small of her back. I've never been very good at last-ditch plans, she said. I prefer hitting first. Outside, the engine noise grew louder, then settled into a low idle somewhere beyond the trees. Harper moved to the window and peeked through the edge of the curtain. Shapes emerged from the tree line. Men in dark winter gear, faces covered, weapons slung low but ready. No insignia, no hesitation. At their head walked Mason Cole, his posture loose and confident, as if he were stepping onto a stage he'd personally designed. He stopped a few yards from the cabin door, scanning the quiet building with narrowed eyes. Inside, Shadow stood at Harper's hip. Rex limped to Ethan's side, teeth bared in a silent snarl. They're here, Harper said softly. Showtime. Mason's voice drifted through the cold, amplified by some handheld speaker. Harper Quinn, he called, tone smooth. I know who you are. I know what you did for this country. I respect that. Harper rolled her eyes. Here we go, she muttered. You have something that doesn't belong to you, Mason continued. A man, a dog, and data that the public would misunderstand. I'm here to fix this before anyone gets hurt. Ethan tried to push himself up, but Rex blocked him with his body, as if to say, you stay. I've seen your version of helping. Harper stepped to the door but didn't open it. She spoke in a normal voice, trusting the wood to carry enough of her words. You drove him off a mountain in a snowstorm, she said. You already hurt everyone you needed to. There was a pause outside. Then Mason laughed. Officer Hayes, he said, you really should have picked your friends more carefully. Miss Quinn is complicated. She has a history with disobeying orders. Harper's jaw clenched. Shadow's fur rose slightly along her spine. Give me the dog. Mason's voice turned colder. Give me the harness. Step aside. You can go back to your vacation. This isn't your fight. Harper opened the door then. Just a crack. Enough to let him see her face. You know what my commander told me on my last deployment? She asked. Mason's eyes narrowed. I can't say I do. He said, pick your wars carefully, Quinn. Her gaze hardened. Thing is, I don't pick them. They find me. Shadow stepped into the doorway beside her, teeth flashing in the pale light. Behind them, Ethan sat, Rex braced at his knees. Harper's voice dropped. And just so we're all clear, anything that tries to take a dog away from its person is my enemy by default. For the first time, Mason's friendly mask slipped. A muscle jumped in his jaw. Last chance, he said, the words clipped. Hand over the evidence. Walk away. Harper reached up and tapped the side of her neck, where an imaginary patch could have been. There's a reason we don't run from storms, she said. We go through them. Mason's gaze went flat. Breach, he said. The word was soft, almost lazy, but it hit the air like a stone breaking glass. Two men moved to the sides of the cabin. Harper shut the door and stepped back just as the world exploded. The front window shattered inward under the impact of a flashbang. Light and sound slammed into the cabin. Ethan flinched, stunned. Shadow barked once, sharp and furious. Harper moved like a blade. She dropped low, kicked the flashbang into the corner before it discharged fully and fired through the shattered glass in one smooth motion. Outside, someone screamed and fell. The door burst inward, kicked off its hinges. Two men rushed through, weapons raised. Shadow hit the first one center mass, knocking him backward, teeth snapping at his wrist until the gun clattered away. Harper sidestepped the second, grabbed his arm, twisted, and drove his face into the doorframe with a crack of breaking cartilage. Ethan, still dazed but determined, raised the handgun Harper had tossed him earlier and fired a warning shot at the doorway, forcing a third man to duck back. Rex lunged, teeth finding the padded thigh of the man trying to flank them from the side window. Pain pierced through his injured shoulder, but he held on, growling deep in his chest. Nice work, big guy, Harper shouted over the chaos. The cabin became a storm inside a storm. Gunshots, shouts, splintering wood, dogs barking in tandem, one dark, one sable, moving with a shared language, older than the uniforms in the snow outside. Then, through the roar, another sound rose. Distant at first, then swelling. The deep, chopping thunder of helicopter blades cutting through cold air. Harper's head snapped toward the sound. A fierce, grim smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. Took you long enough, she muttered. Outside, Mason looked up as a dark shape descended from the clouds. A federal helicopter, floodlights blazing, emblazoned with markings no local cop could ignore. The beam swept over the clearing, catching Mason and his men in a hard, holy white glare. Drop your weapons, a voice boomed over a loudspeaker. Lie down on the ground. Hands where we can see them. All at once, the balance shifted. The hunters had become the ones outlined and exposed. Inside the cabin, Harper lowered her gun slightly, chest heaving. Shadow panted beside her, fur bristling, eyes still locked on the doorway. Rex released his grip on the downed attacker and limped back to Ethan, leaning heavily but refusing to fall. Ethan exhaled, a rough, unbelieving sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. We're actually not dead, he said. Harper glanced at him, then at the two dogs, then back at the door. Not today, she said. Today belongs to us. Outside, Mason Cole dropped to his knees in the snow, hands laced behind his head, as federal boots thundered into the clearing. It took a storm to bring them all together. It took courage to keep them standing. And it took two German shepherds to remind them what loyalty looks like when the world is on fire. Winter never left the mountains completely. It just stepped back a few paces to let the light through. Months passed. The headlines came and went. Lieutenant arrested in K9 smuggling scandal. Hero dogs help uncover corruption ring. Silver Creek learns its favorite son had teeth. Mason Cole went from speaking behind podiums to standing behind bars. The USB from Rex's collar became Exhibit A in a courtroom that smelled of old wood and stale coffee. Names were named. Accounts were frozen. Officers who had looked the other way were forced to look at themselves in the mirror. For once, the truth didn't just whisper. It roared. Back in the valley, the cabin off Highway 17 changed in quieter ways. Snow melted from the roof in thin, shining lines. Pine branches shed their white burdens. The path between the cabin and the road wore down into a well-trodden stripe. Boot prints, paw prints, and occasionally the marks of suit shoes that hated mud. On one soft morning, Harper stood on the porch with a mug of coffee. She wore a lighter jacket now. The scar on her shoulder still ached when the temperature dropped, but it no longer felt like the only story she carried. Below the porch, in the yard that used to be nothing but wild grass and silence, two German shepherds tore through puddles as if they'd been born to splash. Shadow, quick and lean, pivoted sharply, dodging Rex's bigger frame. Rex, healed but forever carrying a slight stiffness in his leg, barreled after her anyway, tail high, barking with all the joy of a dog who had seen death and chosen life twice. "Rex," Ethan called from the side of the cabin where he was fixing a loose fence board. "You break that leg again, and I'm sending you the bill." Rex glanced back at him and gave a huff that could only be translated as, "Worth it." Ethan laughed, a sound that came easier these days. The bruises had faded. The nightmares hadn't vanished, but now there was always a wet nose nearby when he woke up too fast. He looked up at Harper on the porch. "You know," he said, "most people go to a spa when they take time off from the military. You pick the one place in Colorado where the snow tries to kill you and the roads throw cops off cliffs." Harper sipped her coffee. "What can I say? I have a type." "What type is that?" he asked. She watched Shadow and Rex race each other through the yard, ears flying, paws kicking up water like silver sparks. "The type that refuses to die quietly," she said. Inside the cabin, a framed patch rested on the shelf above the mantel. Harper's old seal trident, edges worn, fabric faded. Beside it sat a newer frame with a photo. Harper, Ethan, Rex, and Shadow standing in front of the courthouse steps, all four looking slightly uncomfortable in the spotlight. Someone had scribbled on the bottom of the photo in thick black marker. "Some angels don't have wings. They have fur and terrible breath." Court in Denver asked about, "You again," Ethan said, walking up to the porch. "They want you to consult for that new K9 task force." Harper raised one eyebrow. "Do they pay in something other than paperwork and headaches?" He leaned against the railing beside her. "They pay in dogs who need someone that doesn't flinch when the world goes loud." Harper glanced down at Shadow, who had just stolen a stick from Rex and was prancing around with unearned smugness. "I'll think about it," she said. "What about you?" she added, side-eyeing Ethan. "You going to stay in that office forever? Or are you going to admit you're happier chasing leads in muddy boots?" He smiled. "I used to think justice was just a file in a cabinet," he said. "Now I know sometimes it starts with a dog howling in the snow and a crazy seal who can't mind her own business." Harper chuckled. "You're welcome." A beat of quiet passed between them. Not empty, but full of things that didn't need to be said. Finally, Ethan nodded toward the yard. "They're not going to stay this young forever," he said. "We won't either." "That's the point," Harper replied. "We don't get forever. We just get this." She gestured at the mountains, at the dogs, at the thin thread of road winding through the valley, at the way the sun caught the edges of the last snow, making it glow like shards of fallen stars. "Storms come," she said softly. "People try to erase other people. Some men wear badges like armor overwrought. But then, every once in a while, someone doesn't give up. A dog refuses to leave a broken handler. A stranger hears a cry and walks into the dark instead of away from it." She looked at Ethan. "And somehow, that's enough to turn a blizzard into a beginning." He studied her face for a moment, then nodded slowly. "So," he said, clearing his throat, "do we call this a team now? Or is makeshift almost family more accurate?" Harper pretended to consider. "Let's start with team. Family is reserved for when Rex stops stealing Shadow's bed." As if on cue, Rex trotted over to the two dog beds on the porch, considered both, and then flopped directly across the middle, sprawling in all directions. Shadow stared at him, offended, before squeezing herself into the narrow strip he left. Ethan pointed. That might take a while. Good, Harper said. I'm not going anywhere. The day stretched ahead of them, unspectacular, ordinary, full of chores and training and paperwork, and maybe a call from someone who needed help. The kind of day that people who had almost died learned to treasure. Sometimes miracles didn't look like lightning splitting the sky. Sometimes they looked like a car that didn't manage to kill its passengers, a woman who answered a dog's howl, a man who refused to let a badge decide who he was, and two German shepherds who believed with their whole hearts that the world was still worth guarding. Out in the yard, Shadow barked at a bird that had landed too close to her tree. Rex joined in because if there was trouble, even feathered harmless trouble, he wanted to be part of fixing it. Harper shook her head fondly. Come on, she said, stepping off the porch. We've got work to do. The mountains watched. The snow receded, and in a small cabin off a quiet road, 4 lives, once scattered by storms, moved forward together, proving in their own stubborn, imperfect way that love and loyalty can outlast even the longest winter. In the quiet after every storm, there is always a moment when the world feels still enough to hear the truth beneath the noise. Some people call it luck, some call it fate, but those who have walked through the darkest nights know that sometimes it is nothing less than a miracle. Because what saved Ethan on that frozen mountain wasn't strength alone. It wasn't training or skill or even courage. It was a dog who refused to give up, a woman who followed a cry in the snow, and a grace that moved quietly between them, guiding their steps even when the night tried to swallow them whole. And maybe that's how God works in our lives too. Not always with thunder, not always with fire from the sky, but with small signs. A voice telling us to turn back, a stranger who arrives at the right moment, a loyal companion who smells danger before we ever could, a spark of hope when we thought we had none left. If you're walking through your own storm right now, if the world feels too heavy, too cold, too quiet, remember this: God has not forgotten you. Miracles still walk beside us, sometimes on 2 legs, sometimes on 4 paws, and sometimes they arrive exactly when we stop believing they ever would. So if this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs a reminder that hope still lives in this world. Leave a comment, tell us where you're watching from, and what blessings you're praying for tonight. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, so more people can hear stories of loyalty, courage, and the quiet miracles hiding in everyday life. May God bless you, protect your home, watch over your family, and send His light into every storm you face. Amen.